up bright and early. I was expecting an empty room today. What a fun weekend. So this is not my first time in Kyiv. I lived here in late 2012. Love this country. So happy to be here. Want to thank everybody that put this together, specifically Mike, who's just elevated the quality of this event. How many of you have been to a d10e before? Obviously, the market has matured, and with that, this event is as well. Very excited. We're upping the rate at which we'll be doing these, so hope to see you all over the world as often as possible. We will always have a good time, and I'm always going to be available. I want to stop because we're in one of those moments of really good times, and it's very easy in these moments of awesomeness to sometimes lose track of what matters. Most of everybody in this room has probably been a huge beneficiary of the growth that we've heard about, and it's in moments like this when everything is up. You don't need me to tell you how great the market is and how to make more money. If you haven't been making money yet in this space, you're doing something wrong. So I want to take us back to what money does. Money, when people come into it for the first times in their lives, doesn't always make you better. I've seen money change people, and sometimes for the worse. An interesting statistic that will, hopefully bring you back to ground is when someone loses a limb, when you become an amputee and you miss a leg or an arm, and someone else that goes and wins the lottery and has that first big payday, 3 years after those two events occur, do you know which person is happiest, statistically speaking? The amputee. The person that's lost a limb is happier than the person that won the lottery. What does that tell you? It tells you that money doesn't make you happy. And it has a way of potentially changing you for the worse. So, keep focused on what got you in this business. We're doing very, very important work that has the potential to change the world for the better. And don't forget why you're here. Remember to stay true to yourself, maintain your integrity. Don't ever compromise your integrity for anything. We have the potential to rebuild the world and make it a better place. And the outcome of how this is going to turn out is going to be determined by us and the quality of ourselves, because we're going to be enabling this. So I want to just talk briefly about the market. You're going to have plenty of awesome speakers throughout the day today that are going to talk about things, but people tend to like market data from me. Start with disclaimers. Everybody read that? Lawyers make me do this. Good. So I want to take us to the big picture. Actually, you can always just read my back if you're looking for disclaimers. I changed the logo for Blockchain Capital a little while ago to a starfish, which I'll get into. So there's a book I highly recommend. It's probably the best book written on decentralization. It's called The Starfish and the Spider. And it's written because if you cut the leg off a spider, does anyone know what happens? It walks with a limp. If you cut off a second leg, more of a limp. If you cut off its head, it's dead. But with a starfish, on the other hand, if you cut that leg off, that leg grows back. But did you know if you cut off any part of the center of this starfish with that leg becomes an entirely new starfish? If you cut this starfish 5 ways through the center, it'll become 5 starfish. It's the best example of decentralization occurring in nature. And so we're a digital starfish, but the reason this matters is ultimately in decentralization and distributed systems. We're moving from a world of centralized systems to decentralized and distributed systems. Some interesting things have happened here. You're, I think, aware of Uber, which does work here. Yes, thank you, Ukraine. And actually, one of my sort of policies these days is I don't want to go to countries that don't permit things like Uber, because we have an ability to vote with our feet. And remember, you do that every time you go anywhere. Thank you for being here in the Ukraine. Very happy to see a country embracing innovation. Amazing things happening here in the old sort of CIS regions. Wonderful things. I mean, just amazing engineers, and it's the engineers here that are building our future. So Uber is the largest taxi company or transportation company in the world at this point, but it doesn't own any cars. Facebook is the largest media company in the world, but it doesn't make any content. Alibaba is the largest retailer in the world, but it has no inventory. Airbnb, obviously the largest provider of accommodations with no rooms. And you've probably seen these slides before, but it's always nice to note that Bitcoin is now the largest bank in the world with no employees or branches. So where are we today? We've been around 9 years, coming up on 10 years as a sector, slowly growing and continuing to accelerate. But in 2017, and let's talk about 2018, we're starting to see, I think, the beginning of consumer adoption. And that consumer adoption is largely happening in the developing world. I've been approached many times going back years ago. Right now, everybody's like in love with Bitcoin. There's very few naysayers. I guess maybe just Jamie Dimon these days. I'm not sure how sincere those criticisms really are. Well, I guess we'll find out later. But in the developing world, so people would come up to me and they'd like, Brock, why should I want Bitcoin? I've read something about it. It's this awful thing. And, why should I want it? And I'm always like, you shouldn't. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, it's not for you. And like, what do you mean not for me? I go, well, do you have a bank account? And they're like, yeah. And I go, I'm guessing you got a piece of plastic in your pocket that lets you conveniently pay for things. And they're like, yeah. And I go, you've got rule of law that's here in theory to protect you, and in most cases often will. You probably have faith in the system. And of the 200 currencies in the world, you've got one that everyone wants more of. As an American, this isn't likely to change your life right now unless you want to be a speculative investor. And based upon what you've told me, I'm pretty sure you don't fall in that bucket, at least not yet. But if we go south of that border and you start looking at places like Latin America, you look at Southeast Asia, you look at Africa, in the same way that they leapfrogged wired telecommunications and went straight to wireless, we have 3 billion people on the planet that don't have any financial services whatsoever. We have another 2 to 3 billion people on the planet with minimal or limited financial services. And that's what makes me get up in the morning and feel really good about the things that we're doing. We have the potential to change the lives of billions of people for the better. And it's the least fortunate people on the planet that are going to benefit the most. And that's what I like to talk to people about. So on the developing nation side, I think cryptocurrency is here. We're essentially where the internet was in, call it 1995, 1996, with 10 to 20 million people and growing. But this is the beginning. And anyone that feels like if you haven't been the beneficiary of some of these great things that have been happening in the industry, you are not too late. I get asked this question all the time, and people are like, oh, I'm too late. I go, no, you're too early. And they're like, what do you mean? I go, we're talking about 10 or 20 million people participating in this trend, and how many of those people are in deep? I mean, if you're in this room, you're probably one of about 10,000, maybe 20,000 people in the world that has made the leap to really be on the front line. And if you call that being late, I don't know what is. This is very, very early, and congratulations to all of you in taking that red pill. So the developing nations is where we're starting to see that consumer adoption is occurring. And then on the incumbent side, it's happening with the commercial stuff. It's the big banks and such that are participating, and that's okay. The incumbents are not, necessarily our enemies. They're our friends, and they're just trying to protect their businesses because the status quo is a nice place to be when you're the incumbent. But in this new world, it's innovate or die. The world is changing. Change is the only constant in the universe, and you have to continue to evolve. And so, a lot of the early banks would be like, Brock, is it going to be good or bad for my business? I'm like, it'll be both. There's some aspects of your business that are going to benefit from this trend, and there's going to be some aspects of your business that won't. Typical innovator's dilemma. Kind of like the telecom industry when voice over IP emerged. They're like, oh, the telecoms are going to go away. We're going to have all direct consumer, calls and whatnot. And the reality is the telecom industry co-opted the technology, re-architected their middle and back offices, and benefited from it. And a lot of change actually has to start with the incumbent. Take things like the energy industry. It's a regulated industry in such a way that it's not going to happen from outside. You have to work with the incumbents to bring, we're going to find ourselves in a hybrid sort of model. The world doesn't just go from A to Z. It goes from A to B to C to D. And remember that, sometimes people that you might not agree with today, might end up being your friends. And we need to be patient with those people that don't understand all the things that we do. Remember, our job is, to teach other people and not to criticize them. We're all a big family here, and that's the big thing that's changing is, well, I'll get into that in a moment. Anyway, this is where that market is. Some kind of amazing things here. We've covered on some of this. We'll just skip through that. I don't think we need to spend any time on that. I covered it. But this is sort of some of the excitement that we've seen. 2014, 15, 16, obviously those incumbents have been coming on board, and it's continued last year to more or less everybody. There are every major call it Fortune 2000 is participating here. And I think that, we're at that point now where it's starting to become real. It's not just tests. Those tests are becoming pilots, and those pilots are going to become deployments. And once those things get deployed, that's when we're going to start to see this scale. And the incumbents are going to be the ones that actually bring in a lot of the adoption in the near term. So we need to help them. Every major VC is in the space. Actually, this was the one where I used to criticize one firm, and that was Sequoia. Because every major VC, every smart investor for the most part is participating at least in some degree to this space, with the exception of Sequoia, but that's now changed, so welcome to the party. And it's a global phenomenon, and this is the thing that's most exciting, and certainly for everyone in Kyiv. Historically, Silicon Valley was the place you needed to be if you wanted to have access to, capital. It's where most of it was. And the one beautiful thing is this is a globalization sort of trend. In the same way that the Internet of Information is democratized information, the blockchain is democratizing value and trust. And it's allowing entrepreneurs and innovators anywhere in the world to have access to the same resources as the people that are sitting in Silicon Valley. The amount of innovation that's going to come from that, because historically you had to be near these centers of gravity, these sources of capital formation, to have an ability to innovate at scale. That can be done from anywhere today. And that's just a beautiful thing. It's a global phenomenon. Capital, obviously, had been coming into the space. 2014, we had capital on par with 1995. 2015, capital on par with the internet in 96. The beauty of that is, back then it cost $5 million to make a website to sell shoes. With open source software, with SaaS, with all of AWS, you can do these sorts of things, and soon to be distributed storage that works. You can build these businesses with 50 grand from anywhere in the world. But VCs in 2016 stopped putting more capital into the space, and this is kind of where the ICO emerged. The first ICO was Mastercoin back in June of 2013, and the industry's come a long way, and that was that the capital stopped in 2016, but the amount of entrepreneurs and the quality of the entrepreneurs coming into the space continued to increase, though the capital didn't. But the entrepreneurs, being the tenacious sort of individuals that you need to be to succeed, said, what about this ICO thing? And last year we had something like 64 ICOs raising a little over $103 million, excluding the DAO. But what the DAO did, as much as it taught us that security is paramount and there's not any room for error in this business, make sure you're getting your security audits not once, but probably twice. And by high quality third parties, security is everything in this new world, and there is no room for error, and you are a fiduciary of other people's things, so make sure you get that handled right. But what the DAO showed us is that this scales. It went from a world of saying, hey, let's go raise money through an ICO because I can't raise money from a VC, to let me raise money through an ICO rather than a VC, because it allows me to bring in my users essentially as my partners versus third-party sources of capital. And as a result of that, it's changing the market. Over $2 billion have been raised from ICOs. That number is going to continue to increase, but here's the data point that I love. Right now, ICOs are bringing in 4 times the money that early stage venture capital is. We've 4x'd the venture industry, and we haven't even started. Venture capital is about to change. The industry will be probably dead as we know it in 5 to 10 years. Though, the roles are not going to go away. Entrepreneurs are always going to need great advisors. They're always going to need resources. They're always going to need access to deep connections and wisdom, people that have been around the block a few times. It just means the structures are going to change. And the structures are not just going to change for venture. It's coming to private equity. It's coming to REITs. These ones in particular, because they're sectors that lack liquidity. And I'm pretty sure that there's not a person in this room that doesn't like liquidity. We prefer, the ability to get in and out of things. And more importantly, too, venture capital is a sector that historically has not been available to everyone. It's been a club for the financial elite. The pensions, the endowments, the high, net worth family offices, but not everybody else. What's happening here is we're democratizing the world of early stage finance in a way that everyone can participate. And the world that we're building is about radical inclusion and making it available to everybody. So this is where I want to transition away from what's going on there, and I want to talk about kind of the things that matter. And one is, how many of you want to meet some billionaires? I'm all about meeting billionaires. But my definition of a billionaire is pretty different than everybody else's. I don't care what resources you have. What I care about is what you're doing with the resources you have. A billionaire to me is someone that is going to change the lives of 1 billion people or more. That's the stuff that's really impressive at this point. Having money no longer buys you a seat at my table. It's about what are you doing? What are your superpowers? What is it that you uniquely do and are able to do, and how can you contribute to this new movement and make the world a better place? And these are the things that are exciting. So, let's all strive to be the best versions of ourselves. And that paradigm shift is coming. Historically, this concept was money is power. I don't believe that's true anymore. I believe a paradigm shift is occurring. It's no longer about money anymore. It's about technology as power. It's about consciousness as power. It's about what is it that you're able to do. And this is the interesting thing that's changing, because I can directly attribute many of the problems in the world to the corporation. And I'm a hardcore capitalist, so I'm not criticizing these things, but the structure of everything can be better. There's nothing in this world that is perfect. Everything can be better, most importantly us. And we can continue to grow, but you have a customer, you have an employee, and you have a shareholder. A customer just wants to go get the best product and service. An employee just wants to do something they feel good about and live their lives. And a shareholder wants to maximize that return on investment. And therein lies the problem, is those three parties want something radically different. There's a complete misalignment of interests. But what happens in a tokenized world is those three roles, the employee, the customer, and the shareholder, the roles become blurred. Those lines become blurred in a way that you don't know which is which anymore. And essentially, they're all wearing one hat. And in a world where the customer and the employee and the shareholder become one, something really fascinating occurs. As a token holder, I'm clearly something that looks a little bit like a shareholder. And in a world where our jobs are disappearing and there will be no more employees, you're electing, you're choosing what you want to participate in. You're choosing a community of people and a philosophical view and maybe a technology that's going to have some positive impact, and saying, I want to be part of that. At that point, you're a contributor, something that looks a little bit like an employee. And I'm guessing at that point, too, you're probably a customer of that service. And when you become all of those things, there's a complete alignment of interests. And in that world, it's no longer about me trying to take care of me and having proprietary things. The world goes from me to we, because anything any of you do benefits me. Anything I do benefits you. And a world where everyone benefits from each other's actions in that ecosystem, there's a complete alignment of interest. It's about sharing everything you have. It's about collaborating with everyone, because anytime someone does something and it benefits everyone, we start to work together. And in a world where you've aligned interests, amazing things can happen. And that's what's so exciting about what we're doing here. Find that purpose. Ikigai is, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, but spend some time. These are great Japanese concepts. Kaizen, to change, to be better, to always improve. And this takes me to something that's important. One of the events that's changed my life probably more than anything is this little event. Does anyone know what this is? Has anyone ever been to Burning Man? We have a few burners in here. So I think the blockchain is the technology that's about to change the world. But technology doesn't have a conscience. Technology doesn't know good or bad. It's just an enabling thing, and the blockchain is the thing that's going to change the world. And I believe Burning Man culture is the thing that's going to fix it. And I want to marry these two concepts, because I think it's the culture of Burning Man. It's about 1 million people in the world have been to Burning Man. It's a very small number. Probably 2 to 3 million people's lives have been impacted by it directly, where they understand the material impact. But a lot of the world's greatest ideas have come from here as well. Eric Schmidt became CEO of Google because of this. Most of Elon Musk's innovations, were ideated there. It's the greatest aggregation of innovators in the world. If you ever need to be inspired, you show up there and your mind will be blown in ways you can't imagine by what we're able to do as human beings if we try. And on that note, I ask you to dream as big as you can. Make that magic. Thank you, Mike. He's like, Brock, I don't know how to describe what you do. What's a better title? And I go, I don't know how to describe what I do. He's like, I got an idea for you. What if you change your title to magician? And let's not, forget about operating with love. I'm wearing an EOS shirt, and this logo is a chestahedron. It's the sacred geometrical shape of the heart. And let's remember, it's not just about me, it's about we. And let's not forget this place that we all live. Let's make sure we take care of our home. And let's take an opportunity to believe everything is possible. You can do anything. And I'm just excited to know all of you. and by the future that we're able to create. And remember to don't ever compromise that integrity. And remember that you're also empowering people in all the things that you do, and make sure that you're empowering the right people and leading by example. And when people are making mistakes, not criticizing them, but educating them and showing them how to be better versions of themselves. This is just a picture from my wedding last year at Burning Man. It's an all unicorn wedding. My groomsmen were the colors of the rainbow plus pink. My bridesmaids, the same. My best man was a woman dressed in black, cracking a whip. And my wife will be here later today, Crystal Rose of Sensei. And on that note, if you have any other questions for me, go to brock.ai, and you can talk to me anytime. Thank you.